Last week, the Federal Reserve announced its largest interest rate hike in nearly 3 decades, which means that the US is probably now on track for a new recession, right when most of the public is already feeling incredibly gloomy about the state of the economy. As you can imagine, this doesn't look great for Joe Biden or the other members of our current governing party. So, what exactly have Democrats been doing to address the economic pessimism sweeping the nation on the eve of midterms? For the most part, not much. The Democratic Party's main preoccupation at the moment appears to be the January 6th hearings. According to the New York Times, some Democrats are hoping that the hearings will give the party a much-needed boost during midterms by giving them a chance to show just how evil, anti-democratic, and Trump-happy the Republican Party remains. According to Politico, other Democrats know the hearings won't help them in November, but they're leaning in anyway. Meanwhile, despite the event's primetime billing, only 19 million people tuned in to watch the first night of the hearings. By comparison, over 73 million people watched the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in 2020. In other words, it's not looking terribly likely that this particular bit of political theater is going to drive Democratic voters to the polls this fall. Worse still is that this whole spectacle has now given Republicans another opportunity to try to outflank Democrats on bread and butter issues by talking about gas prices, while Democrats are talking about Mike Pence. Bernie Sanders is now begging the Democratic Party to get its shit together. In a recent op-ed, he wrote, "While the Democratic Party has, over the years, been hemorrhaging support from the white working class, it's now losing support from Latino, Black, and Asian workers as well." Bernie, of course, is right. The latest warning sign was a special election last week in South Texas, where Republican candidate Myra Flores flipped a congressional seat in a largely working-class district that has consistently voted for Democrats for nearly a century and is 84% Latino. What did her ads focus on? Jobs, gas prices, and, quote, Texas workers and their wallets.
Washington liberals are killing the American dream, attacking oil and gas jobs and causing prices to skyrocket. I'm Myra Flores, and I approve this message because I will protect Texas workers and their wallets.
The truth is, if Democrats are crushed in midterms this year, which seems almost guaranteed at this point, it won't be because of disinformation, voter suppression, white supremacy, or any of the other excuses that the party likes to trot out to explain why they lose election after election. It's going to be their complete lack of interest in campaigning to working people. According to a recent survey from Pew Research, 70% of Americans currently consider inflation a very big problem, and 23% consider it a moderately big problem, which means that in total, a staggering 93% of Americans say that inflation is a big problem. No other issue in this survey even comes close to inflation, but it is notable that the second-ranked issue is the affordability of healthcare, which nearly 80% of respondents said was either a very big or moderately big problem. Now, I could be wrong, but it seems like these are actually issues that Democrats could theoretically campaign on instead of avoiding. After all, when asked about inflation, most voters have rightly identified supply chain shocks and corporate profiteering, not the Biden administration or social spending, as the main drivers of increased prices. Democrats might not be able to wave a wand and lower gas prices or make inflation disappear overnight, but I suspect that fighting for any kind of economic relief for working people would go a lot further electorally than simply calling inflation, quote, Putin's price hike, as Biden did earlier this spring.
70% of the increase in prices in March came from Putin's price hike in gasoline.
For instance, even the incredibly popular expanded child tax credit that Democrats shamefully let expire at the end of last year would have alleviated some of the financial pressures of soaring gas and grocery prices. Maybe it's time for Democrats to at least talk about renewing that one. The same, of course, goes for the issue of health care. We all know that Republicans have consistently and vehemently opposed every single popular healthcare reform, including Medicaid expansions and bills to lower prescription drug prices. So when nearly 80% of the American public agrees that healthcare costs are a problem, it seems like it might be an opportune time for the Democratic Party to rally around the Medicare for All bill that Bernie Sanders recently reintroduced. Of course, not a peep about the bill from mainstream Democrats. As usual, Democrats have largely resigned themselves to playing catch-up on fundamental bread-and-butter economic issues, which opens up an unfortunate political opportunity for Republicans to position themselves as economic populists, no matter how disingenuous they may be. Take the still ongoing baby formula shortage. The baby formula recall that kickstarted the current crisis began back in February, but Democrats really only addressed the formula shortage after it started becoming a PR liability for them in May, which gave Republicans time to get out in front of the issue. Marco Rubio, for instance, ended up calling for the government to invoke the Defense Production Act to start manufacturing baby formula well before the Biden administration ended up doing exactly that. Now, I probably don't have to tell anyone that Republicans have no actual solutions for the families who are getting squeezed. After all, almost 200 Republicans voted against increased funding to the FDA to address the baby formula shortage just last month. But this all still raises the perennial question: why are Democrats letting Republicans blindside them on economic issues? Some of it, of course, is due to the party's fawning deference to the professional managerial class wing of its base. Democratic politicians know they can excite and reliably raise money from affluent donors by stirring the culture war pot, as politicians like Gavin Newsom have been tirelessly doing. But decades of bleeding working class votes, particularly in swing states, should make clear how futile this strategy is. To invert Chuck Schumer's famous line, for every New York Times reading college graduate in an already deep blue district who gets pumped up when Democrats campaign on the January 6th hearings, the party should expect to lose 2 working class voters in the Rust Belt or the Southwest. This is incredibly unfortunate because at this point we have survey after survey that confirms how effective strong economic messaging is with working class voters. In fact, in yet another study on this topic that was just released, researchers tested campaign messaging with residents of former manufacturing towns to see what kinds of political messages resonated most with voters in America's deindustrialized Rust Belt. They found that messaging, quote, based on populist economics, including healthcare, wins out over the culture war. In terms of the things working class voters in these counties care the most about, are most focused on, are most passionate about, it is economics, not culture war debates. And yes, we all know that Democratic Party elites have long ceased to care about the white working class in the Midwest, but as Senator Sanders and others have noted, Latino and Asian working class voters are also increasingly abandoning the party. As dire as midterms look for them right now, Democrats still have a chance to win back working people, and the way to begin doing that has been staring them in the face for years. They should act on it before it's too late. If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.